All right, cool. We're rolling. Dude, Joel, I have a little surprise for you at the beginning of this episode that I wasn't going to tell you about. I'm super excited because I just went onto our Spotify, and there are 56 five-star reviews on Spotify.
Are you serious?
Yeah, man. I was super
Whoa.
surprised when I went in there. You guys really came through for us on those Spotify reviews, so thank you so much for that. And on top of that, we have 10 five-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, and five of them are four of them are actual like text reviews. So I want to just give a shout out right now to Def Param, Max Power 99, 1911 Rocky, and Joseph Fuego 555 for dropping some awesome reviews for us on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate that, and that really keeps us hyped to keep producing content.
Dude, that's so awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot to everybody who's been taking the time to listen. We've been getting a ton of good feedback on Twitter. Everybody says that they're really enjoying listening to the content, so we're just glad to be, pushing this out, and hope you keep enjoying it.
It's so exciting, right, man? People have been tweeting and stuff like that, and every time I just get like hyped to go do some research for the next episode and stuff. So, yeah, definitely
100%.
appreciate that. But yeah, okay. So I guess let's just dive right in today. Actually, you know what? We're going to talk today about the PortSwigger top 10 web hacking techniques of 2022, which was pretty much the biggest piece of content that was released over the past couple weeks, sort of outlining what the top web hacking techniques of 2022 were, and kind of do a little bit of I don't know if we can do a deep dive because there's 10 of them and we've only got an hour here, but we're just going to try to skate over each one of those, give some comments on them, talk about the various techniques. But before that, the drama, Joel. The drama, because we shouted out TruffleSec on our podcast a couple weeks ago, and shit hit the fan. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you may have seen there was some drama on Twitter and whatnot, but basically, I believe that the TLDR is that TruffleSecurity with the new XSS Hunter, basically, they were logging statistics about callbacks and all that kind of stuff.
Security people don't like that shit, man. They really don't.
And yeah, they tweeted out like a summary that was essentially, here's all the callbacks that we've had, successful exploits, all that kind of stuff. And people were pretty pissed because they were like, hang on a second. You're looking at our stats. You're looking at our callbacks. You could just be taking our bugs. You could just be seeing these 0 days that are being exploited. So I have seen some people mention that you should self-host your own instance of XSS Hunter, which is definitely a viable option if you have a server or you want to just spin up a little instance. And I've even seen some programs go as far as to say that they won't accept reports that are using an externally hosted XSS Hunter.
Yeah,
So
I
you
saw that
have to
too.
use your own.
It was right surrounding this drama too, I think, right? Like one of the biggest programs out there kind of send out a message on HackerOne and said like, hey, if you use a non-self-hosted XSS Hunter instance, then no bounty for you.
Yeah, and that's like, I think it's pretty rare when I see a program react to that quickly and that aggressively, I guess, which is pretty surprising, but I think it's generally a good move. I think that TruffleSecurity has also sort of stepped back and said, this wasn't really intentional. We were just trying to celebrate the use of the product. We're not trying to steal your bugs or anything, but I think the point remains that, this is something you should probably just think about and keep an eye on if you're using externally hosted tools. Just remember that those people can have logs of anything you're putting in there, right? So if you're putting in a 0 day or some bug that hasn't been reported or released, you never know who's going to see that. You never know who has access to those logs. So just be cautious, think before you paste, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I maybe it's a hot take, and I am notoriously not privacy conscious. Like I've got Google Homes all over my house and all sorts of stuff like that. But don't use that against me, guys. Maybe I shouldn't publicly admit that on the podcast. But I don't know, man. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, clearly it was just statistic. It's not like they're in here like saying, hey, Run Reader, congrats on your blind XSS. That would be creepy. But in this case, it's just it's just statistics, and obviously it's not a great idea anyway, because vulnerabilities, they definitely should be tried to kept private between the bug bounty hunter and the company you're reporting it to. And so there's definitely some I definitely understand from the program side them saying something like, hey, we don't want to see this in our program, but I think the backlash on Twitter was a little bit overdone, especially considering the fact that TruffleSecurity is providing a free service to us and actually went in and enhanced the product, and then was just kind of celebrating their dub on like, oh, we got cool Git issues, cloud credentials, and cores popping up. So I don't know. Maybe that's a hot take.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you on that. It's like, it's kind of tricky because on one hand we want to be like very like security positive, and on the other hand, like, they have a product, they need to like promote it, right? I don't think that TruffleSecurity is doing what people are sort of like alluding to, which is that they're going into the logs, they're looking at the things, your callbacks, and then they're taking your bugs and like doing who knows what with them. I would be very surprised, right? If you think about it from like a business perspective, it's not great optics if that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
If that were to get out in any way, which since people are already kind of like saying that could be a thing, it would be a pretty dumb idea. And they're a security company, right? Like that, I feel like they have some ethics already.
Yeah.
Like they kind of know. And in their statement, they sort of address that. So I think it is a little bit of an aggressive move from the community, just being like, screw TruffleSecurity, host your own, and all that kind of stuff. But security people are going to be security people.
They are.
We're all varying different, paranoid.
Yeah, and the privacy piece, I don't know. I have definitely been called out a couple times about not being conscious about that, but I also feel like that almost feels to me like delusions of grandeur, right? Like if I were like, I don't know, like head of the CIA or something like that, and people had a reason to like want to get in my Google Home and just hear like the stupid conversations I have with my wife or like, weird shit like that, then I would be a little bit more security conscious. But like at the end of the day, I'm a podcast host. I'm a solo entrepreneur, bug bounty hunter. Like, who's really going to go through all the trouble and use a Google Home exploit to, pop me? So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's
just
I've
how
always
it is.
said that like your threat model should be your threat model.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It doesn't have to be like a universal threat model. Like you sort of should just look at your life, look at your context, and decide how secure you need to be.
Yeah.
So like, if you're worried that somebody's going to be dropping a 0-day on you, is that a valid concern?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some Russian state like actor is gonna drop a 0-day on you. And hack
I don't know, man.
Why,
I have heard some pretty like crazy shit though about like foreign states and vulnerability researchers. So
That's true.
I'll definitely my threat model definitely includes being careful around specific foreign countries, but yeah. So all right,
you're making me go back and forth on this. Maybe
I know. Well, we'll talk about it off the air. But yeah, there's definitely some weird stuff that's happened. But yeah, okay. So TruffleSecurity, that's our take. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Your threat
Use it
model
at
should
your
be
own
your own.
risk. If you're really concerned, host it yourself. That's pretty much it.
Or and you didn't get this advice here. Use it, and then when you get the call back, go host your own. And then do it again and get the call back again and report that.
Genius.
Didn't hear it here. I don't know who that was that just took over the mic, but
Whoa,
all right, no. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about real quick before we hop into the PortSwigger top 10 was two things real quick, two just little news blurbs. FUF released FUF 2.0, and it's got some real nice new features surrounding being able to track back which requests caused a certain functionality, and then also being able to extract data out of your FUF, which your FUF searches or your FUF brute forces, which I think is a huge feature. I use that in Intruder all the time. The like match and extract sort of feature in Intruder. So definitely love to see that. As always, Juhui Juhui knocks it out of the park.
Juhoi? Yeah,
Juhoi, I don't know. I'm sorry, bro, but you knock it out of the park with Fuff. So thank you for that awesome community contribution, and just wanted to shout it out. And then also, Kaido released a super nice HTML preview feature, which I use all the time in Burp Sweep, and was stinging a little bit. It took a little getting used to not have that in Kaido, and now I can just have it in Kaido. So another great reason to check Kaido out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when we were talking about FFUF,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about a conversation I had with Jay Haddix not long ago about the scanner brute force or dirt search or whatever that he uses. And he uses one called Ferox Buster, which I had never heard of.
Yeah, I think I did hear him mention this.
Yeah, it's a really cool tool. It's written in Rust. It's super fast. And he actually prefers it over FFUF, I believe.
Wow.
Mainly just because it does it has some nice features. Like you can interrupt it, you can modify the search as it's going in real time. You can sort of interact with those results that it's already found. And it's written in Rust. I think FFUF is Go, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so probably a little bit faster, but it's really cool to see
too.
other nice tools in this space. I use both, kind of depending on use case, but I've definitely been leaning a little bit towards Ferox Buster just for the different use cases and to try out that new tool. So definitely check them both out. But the new version of FFUF V2 is packed full of awesome features, like you were talking about. So if you haven't updated your FFUF in a while, update it and give it a run and check it out.
The content discovery wars continue. I feel like every couple of years I'm switching, from product to product, just chasing the extra, little bit of efficiency or the nice new features. So always appreciate.
We used to scan with Python.
Oh my gosh, dude. I still have code running on my server that scans with Python because sometimes you just need slow and steady,
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and hop into the PortSwigger top 10 web hacking techniques. Drum roll. I don't know if you can hear that, but I'm drum rolling. Dude, I get so excited when I see this every year because these techniques are such fire, and it actually took quite a few hours to read through all of these in prep for this podcast because they're so good and so in-depth, and a lot of them are really complex. So I've still got a couple in here that I don't fully understand. So hopefully we can kind of talk that through, or maybe one of our listeners can pop in and explain it to me. But
yeah, 100%. A lot of these, I was surprised I hadn't even heard about them. And I was reading through them, and they're all fantastic write-ups. It kind of varies across the space, the quality of write-ups that you can see, but these were all very top tier, well written, well documented, well explained. They had diagrams and pictures, and definitely very well written write-ups. So I would encourage anybody who's curious about more of these. We'll link it in the description below, but we'll put the top 10 list from PortSwigger. We'll put the article there, and you can look through them all. And there's also, they included the list of nominees.
That's always a good read.
Even more, there's an infinite list of research that you can read through there. But these, I think I honestly prefer it to the OWASP top 10. OWASP is just a little too generic for me, and I really appreciate the level of specificity that each of these goes into, where it's more like a specific bug, and it talks about sort of the methodology and stuff behind it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The OWASP top 10, I think definitely has its spot, but this is sort of in a different category for me personally, because these are actual, specific techniques and hands-on vulnerabilities, which has a different ring to it. And also, I love the fact that this, I just wanted to shout out File Descriptor on here. He's on the expert panel of researchers that kind of helps put together this. I haven't seen much from him in the past couple of years, since before COVID, but I love that guy, and he does a great job with, and the rest of this panel is obviously amazing too. So thank you for the excellent work, people over at PortSwigger and people on the panel for this top 10 web hacking techniques document.
You can always be almost 100% certain that there's some really crazy cool research going on behind the scenes when File Descriptor's being quiet.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I can't wait to see what he comes up with, man. He's still like my go-to. Like, if I have some weird, dude, your cat is on top of your printer.
Trying to break my printer.
Yeah, man, he's still my go-to whenever I have like some crazy like, hey, is this possible in any, Edge browser versions or like weird stuff like that? He's the one. So, all right, cool. Let's check out number 10 on the list. This one goes to none other than Mr. Curry, Sam himself, Mr. Zazzle, as he's known in the live hacking circuit. This is a Universal XSS on Netlify. And actually, dude, I'm a little salty about this one. I told this to Sam too, because he told me about this before he released it. And I was like, dude, I freaking knew there was bugs in those endpoints. Like, I just didn't. That's just one of these ones that I like had it on my list of sketchy stuff. And then I actually just never went down the hole. And then, some crazy bugs pop up later. So props to Sam for doing that.
That's the worst feeling when you're like, it's tingling your like hacker, like spidey sense. And you're like, I should put this on my list. Maybe I'll check it out later. 6 months later, you're dealing with too many other things. And then boom, out of nowhere, blog post. And you're like, I knew it.
Yep, I know
that
it,
FOMO.
man. So, all right, let's do it this way. I'll talk about, there's 3 bugs in this one. I'll talk about 1, you talk about 2, and then we'll joint talk about 3 or whatever. So the first bug on this little list here is an open redirect, and it's pretty fairly straightforward. But one of the things I do want to highlight here is that it utilizes something that I think people should be aware of in these sort of situations is the way that browsers redirect when you give backslashes and like, for example, you don't have to have HTTPS in the beginning of your location header to get an open redirect. You can do it with // you can do it with some combination of slashes and backslashes. So when you're trying to break a regex for open redirection or something of the like, then definitely kind of play around with all these different values. And sometimes you can even get chains where you give it one thing and then it redirects to something else, and then when it normalizes the thing that you told it to redirect to, that causes a redirect. So brilliant work here by Sam as well. And I think Sam was also one of the people that kind of helped foster this behavior in me as well, just kind of seeing Sam's bug at live hacking event and just from hacking together. So yeah, really, really good stuff here. And I love how he also mentions that a lot of these sites are also using OAuth, and later in the top 10 list we'll talk about OAuth and how you can use open redirects to try to do stuff with OAuth. So definitely not shying away from dropping an open redirect 0-day, because it can definitely be used in chains for much more impact.
Yeah, I feel open redirects are one of those things that, like, in the beginning, like, it's one of the first things that you think is like, oh, this is a cool bug, but the more you push into it, the more you're like, this isn't quite severe enough to be like something that just to report on itself. Yeah. But then just like one step further, as you just get a little more experience, you realize like it's a perfect like chain mechanism. And if you find one, just like write it down, keep track of it, give it to like work with somebody else on it, because almost certainly there's a really good use case for it where you can escalate that impact. Yeah.
You rarely have to report them on alone. You can almost always escalate them and use them in some other parts of chains.
Yeah. So the second thing that that Sam, and I don't know if Sam was working alone on this or if they were working with other people, but the second thing that they found was both an SSRF and an XSS. So essentially there was this path that you could get within the Netlify IPX library, and you do / I think underscore IPX and then W_200. I think that's for basically like a thumbnail type. You give it a resolution or whatever, and then you would. In the path, you would URL encode an HTTP URL, and it would just fetch it, and it would check for it to be an SVG, and then it would just render it. So if your SVG had an XSS payload in it, because SVG is vector-based, so you can put elements in it, and you can run XSS through it. So it would SSRF out to your server, assuming, I think there was actually a host check somewhere.
Yeah, it says in here that there's some whitelist, and he was a little bit frustrated that it wasn't a totally universal exploit, which, dude, as a piece of software, you don't want to go up against a frustrated Sam Curry, man. Yeah. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is one of those use cases that we were talking about, right? Open
Yeah.
redirects. This is a perfect example. If there's some sort of host, if there's a
Mm.
host whitelist, allow list, and you need to get around that, find an open redirect within that host, and then use it to get to your own host.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so for the third one, where he does fully, get arbitrary universal XSS on any of these instances and of these Netlify instances, is when he gets into the, white box source code review, which is really. I think this is a technique that I've been working on with my mentees a little bit more lately, and they've been really eating up. Is this getting into the code, really starting to read through, trace data inputs, and it would have been very hard to find this otherwise, I think. But what he does here is he goes through and he finds in the source code for Netlify IPX, he finds the X forwarded protocol header is being parsed and integrated into these requests, and it's easy to think, okay, well, would just be for protocols, but after reading the code, he actually finds that you can just stick a whole URL in there as the protocol, and then just truncate the rest of the request using a question mark at the end, or I'm sure you could use a hashtag as well, making it a part of the URL fragment, and then in the end, that's the thing that gives him the full SSRF. And I want to point out here one of the things that Sam does really well, which is Sam understands the threat model here, right? He normally, if he's got an SSRF 0 day, he'd be talking about the SSRF, not the XSS. Right. But these are static websites. And so at the end of the day, there's not a lot of impact to the SSRF. And there is literally the most impact you can possibly have on these static websites is XSS. And so he does a really good job here of highlighting that actually this results in cross-site scripting, which is the primary impact in these sort of scenarios. So shout out to Sam for that and for not getting distracted by the cool, shiny bug type name of SSRF and actually following the threat model for the websites.
Yeah, and I think another great thing to call out here is that this is Next.js, right? So Next.js is used very, very frequently within Web3 websites, where you're dealing with NFTs, minting, and wallets, and approvals, and there's a lot of risk at hand, and so being able to have arbitrary XSS on any of those websites is huge, because most of the time these websites are designed very, very specifically to only let you mint a certain thing or sign a certain message or something like that with your wallet. And if you can make the user do something else completely unexpected, you could literally empty their wallet. You could steal all of their money. So
oh my gosh, so impactful.
There's a huge amount of risk, and
yeah.
the fact that it's universal and it's such a widely used library, it's just an awesome finding.
Yeah, way to go, Sam et al. On that one. Jumping to number 9 on the list, we've got, let's see, who is this by? It says Medi in the list, but I'm not actually familiar with this hacker, so I'm going to have to check them out. But I am familiar with and absolutely love client-side patch reversals, and it's just such a little scrappy bug that you're like, really, are you trying to make something out of a client-side patch reversal? But dude, it really has some crazy impact sometime. And I always pay attention to these, because anytime you're taking user input and you're integrating it into requests, there's potential, there's risk there. And I think even as we see more and more of same-site strict adoption happening, and I talked about this in other podcasts, but I'll say it again, as we see same-site strict, or even same-site lax, but particularly same-site strict, getting adopted by more and more websites in the future, this is going to be the new CSRF, is trying to figure out how to make these requests, trying to abuse the requests that websites are making on their own from the same origin. And then using that for your benefit. And I think this hacker here does a really good job of doing this in this write-up.
Yeah, 100%. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, because I think actually one of the bugs that we talked about was a client-side.
Yeah, it had some pieces of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so very similar concept. Obviously, it's case by case, but this is another one of those great examples where chaining bugs together, open redirects, and sort of thinking about the context of the application and building that impact scenario around the application, just like a great use case. So essentially the bug is that there was a parameter that you could provide in the URL, and it would cause the client to load a CSS with that parameter in the URL. And so they were able to chain this with an open redirect that they had found and a path traversal. So they .. and then hit their open redirect path and open redirect it to an attacker controlled resource that is a CSS file. And then you use CSS exfiltration, which is something that we've also briefly
Freaking
touched
love
on.
that,
but,
man.
Yeah, at some point we should maybe give a full
yeah.
in-depth discussion about.
Dude, I've got such a. I'm sorry to steal it, but I've just got such a crazy bug, such a crazy CSS injection bug that I've got to talk about on this stream. So that's coming. I'm gonna tease y'all right now. It's so good. But yeah, okay, we'll talk about that later. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I wanted you to talk about it because we had mentioned it. Like this is the Singapore bug, right?
No, this is actually
Oh.
so this is actually my bug. And I know the Singapore bug was, well, actually I won't say whose bug it was, but really awesome hacker. But dude, actually I'm not sure you've even seen this one because you weren't in. Actually, I can't say what it is either because that also gives it away. But I don't know that you saw this one because you weren't in person at this event. I think you were remote, so I'm not sure you tuned into the show and tell. But it's probably the bug that I'm most proud of. Like as far as like I just put a crap ton of time in here, and it just uses all these different like scrappy edge techniques, and in the end, it comes together so beautifully. So anyway, okay, I'll talk about it at a different time.
Right.
You'll get to see it.
You
It's
got me
clutch.
hyped to hear about that at the end.
Okay, so yeah, like Joel said, taking a parameter, so you redirect the victim to a specific URL with an attacker-controlled parameter, and that parameter gets injected into a CSS file, which is dynamically loaded based off of that input. You use the input to do a path traversal, hit an open redirect that you found, and that redirects to the attacker-controlled CSS file. And when the attacker CSS code is loaded on the website, you can use that to exfiltrate things like CSRF tokens or user data. And then if you do, CSRF tokens, you've just got full access to CSRF. So a lot of times you can get account takeover or something like that. So really, really creative flow here. Love it, Mehdi. Congratulations on the winning of being put into the list. I don't even know. Is it called? It's not called a nomination. What is the final round candidates? Is the thing that
the
they
top
use.
10 being in the
Yeah.
top 10, I guess.
Congrats for being in the
pretty
top
awesome.
10. Yep.
Cool. So what is this? Number 8?
Number 8. Yep.
Yeah, so number 8, man, this was an insane bug. I was I was reading through this and I was like, how is this
Oh my
even
gosh,
how is it
yeah.
possible that this is
I
a
know.
thing that
Freaking, I cannot believe that and I love how also, just before you explain this one, because you take this one, Joel, but I just want to say, like, I love how in here, in this article, they talk about how, like, what things should have saved them. Like what kind of like weird little like weird math things or like weird checks that actually should have made it like, we see that all the time in bugs. Like you have this attack vector and then like the developer just gets lucky and like some weird thing doesn't work out and it breaks the whole exploit. And he notes, the author here notes a couple of them. And they just, what things could have happened but actually didn't to save them. And it just seems like a perfect storm for this vulnerability.
God, dude, we've talked about this so often, but read the docs. Okay,
Yeah,
just
man.
Read the docs. Read how it's supposed to work, and then look at how it's actually working.
For sure.
Right, because this is something that happens over and over again, and we're gonna see this also in some of the other bugs that we talk about in this list. But reading the docs is so huge. Actually, the next one we talk about is gonna also be a very big read the docs moment. But so essentially, this bug was a lack of ECDSA signature verification in like Java 15, 16, 17, and 18 and
Oh my
older,
gosh.
I think. So, so essentially what happened is the Java implementation of ECDSA got rewritten from C++ into native Java. And when that happened, the migration was missing a lot of these safety checks that should have been in the ECDSA algorithm for hashing. And so essentially what happened is if you gave it a signature that's all zeros, TLDR is that the math is 0 times anything is 0, right? And so if you multiply a blank signature that's all zeros by anything, it's always going to come back valid. And so, it's, I mean,
Oh my
it seems
gosh,
simple, right?
it hurts me. It hurts me, man. It really does.
It's so crazy. And this blog does a great job of sort of walking you through without getting like super technical. Because
Yeah.
I think anytime you sort of delve into like the crypto side, like the elliptic curves and all that kind of
The
stuff.
cryptography side, to be clear.
Yes, the
Yes.
cryptography, not the cryptocurrency, but
Uh-huh,
the cryptography side, that crypto.
Yeah.
It can, I mean, even for me, it goes way over my head a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But this was to a level that even I could understand.
Yeah.
And essentially what happens is, like I said, if you give it a fully blank signature, if you look at the math behind the scenes, 0 times anything is 0. My cat is trying.
Dude, what is your cat doing, man? All right, dude, I think this might be the one. I think this is going to be the one where we're going to post video. So if you want to see what Joel's cat is eating out of it, I don't know, what is he even doing? But this is the one.
Start my
Okay.
3D printer up.
No, but yeah, man, I totally agree. I think, he really talks about the basics of, R and S, and I'm, to be clear as well, I'm not big on the math side of things. People hear, oh, you're a hacker, oh, you computer science, must be a math boy. I'm not a math boy. But yeah, no, this stuff is simple enough and really well explained. The perfect example of what you want to see in a write-up, I think. So
just a
shout out
perfect
to
storm
them.
of bad
Yeah.
things. And one of the awesome things
Neil.
that I bookmarked that was mentioned, and I had never heard of this, but there's a thing called Project, I think it's Weishproof.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Is how it's pronounced. I'm not really sure. WYCHEPROOF.
Yeah,
Weishproof.
I have no
but
idea.
It's by the Google security team, and essentially what it's designed to do is it runs crypto libraries through like a standard test suite, and it'll feed like known crypto issues, including this bug that was talked about with a blank signature being validated incorrectly, and it lets you sort of sanity check to make sure that everything is
Nice.
working right. And Neil said that he ran it. He updated Weishproof to work with the Java versions that he was testing against, and sure enough,
Yeah.
it found it immediately.
Wow.
So I think that's a really great thing if you're working at a company, or maybe you're auditing something crypto specific. Maybe just run it through that Weishproof tool and see if it finds anything, because that's certainly a lot easier than doing all the auditing yourself and trying to find the nuances within the code. If it'll just be like, hey, there's an issue here, and here's what it is.
Wow. Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I and I also just want to say about on the topic of Weishproof, I clicked on the GitHub repo, and at the top of the GitHub repo it says like, Project Weishproof is named after Mount Weishproof, the smallest mountain in the world. And then you go here and it's like it's got on Wikipedia it's got a picture of just like a field. And it's like, this is the mountain.
Wait, okay, I'm looking at this.
Yeah,
how
I
is
don't
this
even know, man. I have no idea. So yeah, shout out to Google for
It stands
crazy.
at 138 feet tall, or 42 meters.
That's so small, dude. That's like a tree.
I feel like I'm about to go on a rabbit hole about what makes a mountain a mountain.
Don't do it, Joel. Don't do it, man. Don't do it. Don't get nerd sniped by Google. I really also like the one thing that I did want to shout out was the multiplicative inverse explanation. Really clean, really simple. And it shows that he really did his due diligence in diving into the code and really understanding all the pieces. So shout out to Neil Madden, and congrats for making it into the top 10.
Yeah, that really makes me think about some other like migrations that are like that, because I mean, this is Java. He mentioned that this is used in JWT and a lot of other like very core like functions.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder what other migrations have happened in other languages, from either like C++ bindings to native language bindings, or other instances of that where they may have forgotten some checks, and there might be some other really, really critical CVEs in there.
Yeah, for sure. And I would like to just a takeaway for the people that are listening. If you want to, or maybe I'll do this after, we'll see. But I would love to just go ahead and generate this 0 signature. I don't know if it's actually like, do you need, 64 bytes of 0 or something like that for like a JWT? You know how like there's some weird stuff in, what's the Burp plugin? I want to say it's like Joseph or something like that, where you throw a JWT in there and then it like signs it with like none or something like that, and it's just an empty string, and it modifies the first part of the JWT and stuff like that. I do that every time I see a JWT, because one time I found one and it was like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. And so I would also, it would be really cool to just have just be able to paste a signature in there, and check and see if that works, and see if they're using a vulnerable version of Java. So it'd be great to tweet out that 64 byte whatever it is, and do it that way.
Yeah, this is reminding me of, I've seen this in a couple CTFs and puzzles, but essentially it'll be using the default or the example code as in your production. So if you look up just the README page on how to encrypt with insert crypto library, and then you copy paste that code, typically there'll be a default key or default ID or something in there. And if it ever gets left, then super easy win. Or same thing with if they're using an empty key or a null key, and you can replicate that and you can re-sign your own.
Yeah.
I know for JWTs, you can pretty easily check this by just going to jwt.io, and you can just paste your JWT in there, and you can re-sign it, and it'll tell you whether or not it's valid for a given signing key. And so you can test with an empty key or a known key, or an example key, and you can see whether or not they may have signed it using that.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to remember the person who wrote this. It was Ian Carroll. There's actually a couple of years ago, he released a tool called Cookie Monster, which helps check for default keys and stuff like that, for vulnerable session cookies in particular, on several different frameworks: Express, Rack, Flask, Django, Laravel. Man, this is so. You know what's weird about doing a podcast, Joel? You start reading all of
You've only ever read in your head.
Words you've only ever read, and you think that would be gone by the time you're 25 or something. Words you've only read in books, oh, I'm a wordy kid that reads books or whatever. But no, when you're in the tech world, there's so many different names and stuff that you've only ever read and never said out loud. It's a gotcha, man. It really is. But 100%. Yeah, I'll link this in the description for of the pod, and you guys can check out Cookie Monster by Ian Carroll.
Yeah, that's a great example. I know that there was another, I think this might be what I'm thinking of, but essentially, the default Flask encryption keys and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you see that in CTFs all the time.
Yeah.
Where it's how would we ever get this secret value? And then you go and you look up, and sure enough, there's default
it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah. Let's keep rolling, because we're only a couple down the list.
Man,
we might have to split this into a double episode this week or something. But all right, number 7. Dude, we were both really excited about this one pre-episode. What an amazing concept this one is. So essentially, the TLDR on this one is there's these things called hop-by-hop headers.
Which I had no idea this existed, by the way.
I know, and yeah, I had read the research when it originally came out, and then I was like, oh, that's so cool. I should, it went into that list of research that I should flesh out that I never flesh out, and never came back out of there. But luckily, Jacob Poe Ted Eos.
We're getting back into.
I know, man. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad.
Jacopo.
Jacopo. I should be able to pronounce this too, because I used to speak Italian, but now my Italian's gone. But it's a great write up, and there's these things called hop by hop headers, and essentially what they allow you to do is remove specific headers at specific points in the processing of an HTTP request. So if you've got a reverse proxy and then another reverse proxy and then the actual server, you can specify okay, I need this header removed at the first proxy, or if you just got a reverse proxy and a server as well. So that's a really cool concept, and could potentially allow for, I would also really like to see people trying to do the same thing that that James Kettle does with request smuggling, in here with this header. So for example, if you go through the first proxy and then it does not process the connection header with an extra space after the N, and then the colon, but the second one does, then you can remove headers that were added by the first proxy, and it would be crazy. But yeah, so happy that they actually took this research that was done years before, actually, I want to say, right? Was it 3 years before?
Yeah, I believe it was 3 years before.
Yeah,
Back
dude,
in
that's crazy. Let me
2019.
find it. Yeah, Nathan Davidson. Yeah, dude, I went back and read this one yesterday. Definitely a good read. Nathan Davidson does a write up on like, okay, this is weird. We should start looking at this, and he's totally right. And then
Yeah.
finally, these guys are able to pull it off a couple years later.
Yeah, it's
So.
another, and like we talked about in the previous bug, this is a perfect example. Just read the document, like read the documentation, and take a
Yeah.
look at what's actually happening. I had no idea that this was a thing, and if you read the RFC, I mean, this is from 1997. Okay, like,
Yeah.
this is
It's been there.
25 years old. It's but it's been around for quite some time, and it literally says explicitly in here that there are like two categories of HTTP headers: end-to-end headers, which are carried throughout the entire request, and hop-by-hop headers, which are meant for transport level connections, and they're not stored or used after they're forwarded by a proxy or a cache. And they say, here are the hop-by-hop headers, and they list specifically connection, keep alive, public, proxy authenticate, transfer encoding, upgrade. All other headers defined as by HTTP 1.1 are end-to-end headers. Hop-by-hop headers introduced in future versions of HTTP must be listed in a connection header. Okay, like it's like extremely verbose. It explains exactly how this should happen,
It's
and you can
so
read that and be like, "Huh, cool," and just keep moving. But Jacopa did an amazing. They sort of like turned it around. They were like, "Hang on a second. If we send two requests concatenated together, like in request smuggling, and there's headers that we need to remove here, I could just define it as a hop-by-hop header and put it in the connection header in my first request, and it'll get removed." And sure enough, exactly by the spec, it gets removed. It's so crazy.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Reading the docs, big dub. And so just to TLDR, what happened here? So they would send the request, and this request would have a content linked header of 53 and a content body that was actually another HTTP request, and then it would specify the connection header as the and the content linked header inside of the connection header as a hop by hop sort of header here. Then when the first proxy was processing it, it would split it would pull off the content linked header, then it would split the requests into two different requests, and then what would end up happening is the response to that request would get sent back to the user, the request that was inside of the request body that was originally a part of the request body, gets processed and parsed as its own request and gets sent back to the user. Or actually, the proper thing to say would it gets put back into the response queue on the Akamai proxy, and then you can trigger that by reaching out with another request. So really awesome job here. Essentially, what it allowed this team to do was just send that request and return back just arbitrary content, which is devastating. And this affected, I want to say, the whole Akamai CDN.
Yeah, I think it was on every edge node, which is
Wow,
kind
that's
of
nuts.
just like absurd. One of the awesome things that Jacopa did was they put this diagram in their blog that does a really great job of visualizing sort of the flow of how this works,
Yeah.
where you send your request and you include the hop-by-hop header in your connection header in the first request. It hits the first proxy, gets split into two requests handled by the second proxy. Two different responses then get sent back to the first proxy. One goes into the queue, one goes back to the requester, and then essentially it's just standard HTTP request smuggling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful graph. Really good job, Jacopo and team. Yeah.
Yeah. And the GIF that they put in there with the POC was just like I was sitting at my desk and I was just looking at that and I was like, are you serious? And I like had to zoom in and I was like, no way.
Yeah.
It's just like a curl request and then they hit some other arbitrary path and it just returns, robots.txt on like some HackerOne underscore username.js. It's like, it's an amazing POC. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, about halfway down on the page there, just stunning. You can just upload any content you want to, paypal.com. Demo.paypal.com was the one they're using here. Really awesome bug. Yeah. All right, dude. It looks like we might only get through maybe the top 6 today. We might have to do
6.
another one later this week or cover it again next week. But let's talk about number 6, and then we'll sort of wrap it up.
Cool. Yeah. So essentially, this was actually research directly from James Kettle, who works at PortSwigger, and this was talking about injecting a separate HTTP request, and very similar to the previous bug, but with like response queuing and all that kind of stuff. The attack vector was very interesting. When I was reading through this, it took me a second to actually understand how it was going through. But essentially, the whole payload goes right in your request path. So if you think about how an HTTP request actually works, like when you request, example.com/foobar, right? It's going to go make an HTTP request that's get space /foobar space HTTP/1.1, etc. And the whole payload, you would URL encode, new lines /r/n or %0d, %0a, and then you put host headers and all that kind of stuff, and it would get decoded, URL decoded, and basically the full raw request would then you have 2 full requests in there. So James explained that somebody had reached out to him and was like, hey, I have this weird bug. I don't really know how to exploit this. Do you have any ideas? And he mentioned, generally speaking, these are types of things that you don't really respond to because most of the time it's just that you've hit a wall. Like you can't actually exploit it. But he had done some previous research that he had published that was talking about this same exact type of thing. And he was like, this feels like something that might actually be exploitable. Let me take a closer look. And sure enough, you literally you put the whole you put the whole request in there.
Just literally
you put like 0D, 0A, and it just
gosh.
turns it into 2 requests, and you have almost like exact like standard HTTP request smuggling. And he did talk about some of the nuances, which is really nice, about some of the more modern preventions that are coming into play around this.
Yeah.
Where like a lot of times browsers, if it receives 2 content lengths, it'll stop. It'll truncate the data that it receives early because the content length is not short enough. But there are still like other ways that you can get around that. You can, either you can give it a longer content length, you can fiddle with it, or you can get it to maybe you can get it to be in the response queue instead, so you get like a full response back. This is an awesome bug from James. James has just like whenever I think of request smuggling,
he kills it, man. He kills it.
He's done so much unique and original research on request smuggling that's all like published, and he's given like so many talks and stuff. It's every time I see another post about it, I'm like, dang, how much further can we go with request smuggling? And it seems like there's no end. Yeah,
and seriously, and I think in one of the descriptions of the write-ups on the top 10 web hacking techniques, I think he quoted, here it is, as noted by file descriptor, it seems like there's an infinite amount of anomalies among proxies that bring you an infinite amount of request smuggling techniques. Very well said. I totally agree. Once again, another banger by James. I really like this, and I've always thought, actually, let me say this first. It makes me think of another article that I read in 2020 by Franz, the king himself, Franz, regarding Nginx misconfigurations. So I'm going to link that below. We don't have time to go into the details of it now, but really awesome read. Franz is number 1 on this top web hacking techniques list, so you'll definitely hear more from him. But pretty much anything that's published on Detectify from Franz is like straight gold. So definitely check those out.
Yeah, I feel like Franz is getting to the level where, like, anytime you see like a new Project Zero blog post, you're like, uh-oh, this is probably bad. And same thing, if I see a new Franz like Detectify blog post, uh-oh.
For sure, man. And I was catching up with him, what event was that at? He was at one of the events that I was at recently, and I was catching up with him, and he like runs a couple companies too, and like does all this. Like, I'm just like, who are you? Like, how do you do this?
Too.
Yeah.
Another family.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, really cool stuff. Goals there. Let's see. I don't think I have any other comments on this one. This one's pretty cool how they just wrote out the whole HTTP request. I think you did a great job explaining it, so I guess we'll leave it there. Let's see. What time are we at? We're at 49 minutes right now. All right. I'll talk real quickly. I'm not going to get to talk about that bug that I was going to talk about, Joel, but I'll give you guys, I'll do the CSS bug that I was talking about next time, and we'll we'll spend some decent
Yeah.
amount of time there. I did
Yeah.
want to shoot out a couple tips here at the end. One, and you'll see this when we get to number 1 on the list, but Franz's post message tracker extension is a necessity. That is absolutely something everyone should have installed. Go download that and keep your, inspect your DevTools tab open to see what kind of post messages are being sent, because there's a lot of scope there, and it's pretty much like an API for the browser that you can access cross-origin, depending on how it's set up. So it's definitely something that should be paid attention to.
It's pretty awesome. I forgot that this was actually a public tool because Franz gave me a private copy of it many years ago. And I was using that for a while, and then eventually he finally released it. But for those who aren't familiar, it's a browser plugin that will log all of the data that's going in post message calls. So between like windows or between tabs via window.postmessage. And it's really, really insightful because that's an awesome vector for like XSS, CSRF. There's like a million different things that you can do, and you can see all the different data that's being triggered between the two events, whether or not there's an origin check, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of really, really juicy stuff to be had. And that tool is free and available, so go get it.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just add these right now to the show notes.
Put it in our link
actually,
list.
I also did a little bit of a write-up on post-message stuff where I mentioned his tracker extension in a little bit more detail, so I'm going to link that below as well.
Yeah. I actually think it's really good at the pace we're going to, because we've basically gotten through number 10 through 4-ish, through 5 or 4.
Yeah.
And I think what we might do is we'll leave the top 3 for the listener. So if you're interested and you've liked what you've heard so far, I mean, the top 3 are like even better, right? It's like
so freaking good.
It's like, and number 1, like I said, number 1 is a Franz Rosenbug. It's an amazing write-up. There's just like so many awesome techniques and takeaways that you can get from all of these. So I would encourage you to just go back, even if you've listened to us talk about these, go back and read them yourself. The write-ups, we're really only like skimming over them. I don't think we can do full justice.
Not even close.
Every single write-up. And so definitely take some time, make some notes. I feel like I have like an endless list of like new things that I need to be checking for now whenever I'm hacking on targets, and especially around request smuggling. It's just like, man, there's so much unexplored attack surface.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, that's a wrap. I don't think I've got anything else in the tips section. We always appreciate, I mean, you could see at the beginning of the episode how excited we were about those reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify and wherever you listen. So definitely do us a solid and leave us some reviews. And we'll talk to you next week on the pod.
Oh, I actually do have one quick tip.
Oh,
and
go
this
for it,
is
man.
something that I told you.
Wow, Joel coming out here with a tip?
I saved it to the end.
It's not even in the doc, Joel.
I know. It's written on a sticky note on my desk. So,
Freaking Joel, man.
Yeah, peak ADHD.
Yeah.
So I had told you about this after our episode yesterday, but I wanted to pass it on to the community. One of our hacking buddies had mentioned that they got an Akamai ban. And we talked a little bit about Akamai and these bugs. But if you ever come across an Akamai ban, you've been a little too aggressive on your scanning, your payloads or whatever. We've all been there. I definitely was not banned from USPS for like 3 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, if you ever come across an Akamai ban, one, you can go to Akamai's site and you can check. There's like a button that you can click that will tell you the reputation for your current IP. So it'll tell you whether or not you've been flagged and why you've been flagged and whether or not you can access Akamai websites. But if you want to get around that immediately, you can change the MAC address on your router. So most routers, I think probably, I don't think I've ever seen a router that doesn't let you do it. But generally speaking, you can go in and you can change the MAC address for your router itself. And it's essentially the same as changing a MAC address on like your laptop, right? The router no longer identifies the same client, so it gives you a new IP address. Same thing with your ISP. Your ISP no longer recognizes your router, gives you a new IP. So you can just trick DHCP into giving you a new public IP address by just changing your router MAC by like one character, and then you can just leave it like that for a couple of weeks, set a reminder, change it back, and you'll be good to go. On that same page that I mentioned, that Akamai, you can look up your IP reputation. There's also like an appeal button or something, and I'd also recommend just hit that, say I'm a security researcher, I was authorized to do the scanning, and if you can't wait, just change your MAC by a little bit, and you'll get a new public IP.
Nice. Pro tips, man. Pro tips. Those bans are so annoying. And I'm gonna keep rolling, man. I got another tip that popped into my brain.
Oh, awesome.
Joel style. On this note of changing the MAC, I think this is a pretty classic tip, but for most web people, I'm not sure it's super intuitive. But I was doing a physical test one time, and I got on a network, and I plugged up an Ethernet cable to my laptop, and it wouldn't give me an IP address. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Well, the device that I had unplugged, I plugged that into my laptop, and I opened up Wireshark, and I grabbed the MAC address for that specific device, and I spoofed my MAC address to that MAC address, and then I plugged back up to the network, and I got an IP. So
Awesome.
it's just a little tip here and there, and maybe you'll use that in your next physical stuff that you do. So.
Yeah, you never know when that's going to come in handy.
Sweet, cool. That it?
That's it for me.
All right, sweet. That's the pod. See you guys next week.
Awesome. Take care.
I definitely just left it and didn't end the
did that?
recording.
Dude, I was just sitting in here